Hello, my name is Jason Reichl, and you're listening to Risk Management Brick by Brick. Every episode, I sit down to talk risk, how to avoid it, how to manage it, and how it impacts our built world. This season, we'll be diving deep into the world of AI and talking its transformative influence on risk management. Over the next 8 episodes, I'll be interviewing a series of experts in the field who will be offering unique insights and perspectives on how AI is revolutionizing the way we approach and mitigate risk. Let's get to it.
Welcome to another episode of Brick by Brick. I'm excited to continue talking about AI, the way to manage it. Today, we have a very important guest. Thank you for joining us on Brick by Brick. I really appreciate it. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Thanks, Jason. Puneet Matai here. I'm excited to be here with you. So, just a brief introduction about myself. I do currently heading the data and AI governance. I'm the data and AI governance lead at Rio Tinto Commercial, based out of Chicago as well as Singapore. So I do switch around. I'm coming with around 20 plus years primarily into the banking and financial services industry. Had a gamut of roles, leadership roles like senior leadership roles with data management, data governance, data strategy overall, and end to end. And now, naturally moving into and transitioning into the AI governance space, given that AI is become the hot topic that it is today.
Yeah, so let's talk about what is your relationship to AI right now? Are you consulting in it? Are you protecting from it? Like, what is your role with AI as it stands right now? Just to set the stage for the audience.
As of currently, I am holding the role of data and AI governance lead at Rio Tinto Commercial, which is basically the commodities trading unit of the Rio Tinto, which is in itself is a mining industry. So not related to the banking and financial services world, but that's where I hail from. So my 20 plus years have been into the banking and financial services world. Right now, I am leading more in the foundations of the AI governance framework itself, coming from the foundations of data management and data governance, which further expands into the AI now that, AI and Gen AI, the technologies are evolving. So my role is more around governance, risk aspect, making sure, the model has no bias, is transparent, is explainable and all that. That's the guardrails I am putting forward. That's my current role.
Let's talk about that though. So what makes you the guy for AI? Like, is your background working with emerging technologies? Is this just something that you've really found passionate about? Like, how did you end up in your current role from why does it make sense to your narrative that you've been on?
It's been quite a journey, right? So I actually started out in the world of technology, data engineering, and architecture, and then slowly moved on to the enterprise, data management, governance space, and long before actually AI became a hot topic that it is today. Now, back then, we were actually focused more on data quality, lineage, access controls and compliance risks, making sure that the right data get to the right people at the right time. But over time, as AI and advanced analytics, became embedded in every day in a day-to-day decision making, it was clear that we needed to evolve, right? So I actually found myself at this intersection of data, technology, AI, and risk, where I was naturally drawn to the AI governance and intentionally, expanded my portfolio and my profile because it builds on the same foundations that I have come across during my past roles. But this is with higher stakes, high risk systems, high risk AI aspects of things. Now, at this particular stage, we are not just asking is your data right or is the data right, but also is the outcome fair? Is the model explainable? Or can we actually trust what a model is doing or AI model is doing? So that's where I come into. That transition, from managing data to governing the intelligence is what really excites me. And it's complex, it's fast moving, and it has a real impact, but also, it has high risk factors associated with it.
Let's dive into that because I think it's an interesting world. Is data engineering in the past was sort of like rectifying the archaeology, it was like you went in and you found stuff and then you brushed it off slowly like a dinosaur bone, and then there was your insight, right? And then you bring that to the business. The world of AI is not working like that. The world of generative, the word generative is completely a different paradigm. So it's data, it's based on data. So it makes sense that, data people would be looking into it. But then we're also talking about this generative aspect. So I think that's important for the audience to keep in their mind about where data is now. That data is actually generating output, not insights, not things that people have to analyze, but actually the output. And that kind of brings us into a different world of talking about it and putting a bigger importance on, did we collect the right data in the first place to feed these models that we are now allowing to generate results for us, right? Or outcomes for us, as you said. So yeah, it's a fascinating world. There's a lot of different roles being changed because of this. And so it's very fascinating to hear about how your roles evolved. My first real question about this AI stuff, and AI governance, especially around financial institutions, things like money, things that are heavily regulated, is what does effective AI governance look like in high stakes regulated industries? Because I know in the tech industry, we're using AI all the time, but the risk is much lower. You don't need to be right every time, right? Where it's different in these regulated industries.
That's a great question. Look, in highly regulated industries, and environments like banking, financial services, healthcare, these are all very highly regulated industries, right? So, effective AI governance is actually what starts with the strong data foundations, right? So, if your data is not well managed in the first place, your AI will never be trustworthy. So from there, it's more about putting in place, clear guidelines and controls. So who builds the model, who validates it, and who monitors it after the deployment? What is the ongoing monitoring like? If we do we in, or are we ending up introducing bias while the model is running in or it's in deployment, right? So those are the kind of things that we look at. Further, it's also about making your AI models explainable and auditable. So what I mean by that is so that when regulators or auditors or even internal teams ask, why did the model even make this decision? How did it come to this particular outcome? We should be able to explain that. If we are not able to explain that, then we have not governed it correctly. So that's for you to showcase your work. It's not just a black box. It cannot be just a black box, right? So that's where it is mandatory for regulated industries like financial institutions.
Does that mean that the industry, let's say the financial industry, cannot be as cutting edge in using the latest of everything as other industries? Or does that mean you just have to work on the model and its deterministic values and have it be able to explain how it got there? Is it both like setting back to be safe and understand how these new models being introduced work? Or is it when the new models come out, retesting, having a testing suite, having results that that you can drive towards and know how it got there and retesting all of those assumptions? It's probably both, but from your perspective, what produces the most risk?
I would say that financial services actually deal with people's money, credit, and even trust, right? So the risks are, of course, high risks, both technical, financial, reputational, and even regulatory, and eventually operational risks as well, right? So I would say the big three risks that would stand out to me are bias and discrimination in AI models. So let's take a classic example of lending. So in lending or insurance and hiring, if you are creating bias, say you're not providing approvals to your lending products or credit card products to a certain demographics, that would obviously be a higher risk, right? So that's a bias and discrimination.
Let me stop you. Let's take these one by one because they're so interesting. So when you see that bias appear in AI and you ask, hey, why did you come up with that determination? Is AI honest enough or is it guarded enough because it's based on unintentional, sometimes biases in the data sets it's given? Is it honest enough to be like, well, we're not giving this loan to this person because of social economic background and firmographic information? Or will it make up some reason as to why it's doing that? Like, how do you validate?
Yeah, so that's where the guardrails and AI governance comes into picture. That's where I come into picture, right? So when we start with a use case or even develop, start an AI model, we need to make sure what are the guardrails and the protocols around it. What kind of data set, what kind of data parameters we are actually feeding into the model to be able to even introduce a bias in the first place, right? So we need to validate the data. We need to do the ongoing validation of the model outcome to make sure that the bias is not getting introduced in it. That's where it becomes really important within the financial services for sure to not just blindly trust the model and to not just blindly just make a model because we want to innovate, right? So that's where the guardrails come into picture. So before we even initiate the development or inception of or even a design of a model, we design the parameters around it. That's when it becomes easier for the AI model to actually give a proper explainability on why, on basis of what parameter we denied a loan or we actually accepted a role. So or a loan. For example, if the model ends up approving every loan for someone who has a subpar credit score or have a history of debts or not paying the loans, so it wouldn't be biased, but it wouldn't be a valid or a accurate decisioning for the bank. So again, ending up with a financial loss.
So we have bias. What other things are in there?
I already covered the lack of explainability. So bias and discrimination, lack of explainability is the second risk. The third would be more of a data drift or hallucinations, which we have heard a lot with ChatGPT and the other generative AI models these days, right? So where basically models, start making decisions based on something which is an outdated or a skewed data. So let's take a classic example of that. My model has been deployed in production for quite some time. And if I'm not doing an ongoing monitoring or validation of the model or the outcome, over a period of time, the data becomes obsolete, the data becomes stale because you're not feeding in more training data. And that's where the hallucinations and the data drift happens. That's another risk that financial services specifically deals with.
Thank you for breaking those down, because I think we have a lot of risk managers who work in other industries, and thinking about these three elements and how it builds trust with the model, but also allows you to actually action on the information coming out of the system, right? We're getting to a point now, for a lot of people, the AI is still really just messing with it and seeing what it produces at a single production level, meaning one human to AI. And now we're starting to see, the things you're talking about, it going into decision making and all of these kind of areas, which give a lot of people pause. What's your perspective on the ethical dilemma of AI? Do you feel like there's an ethical thing here, or do you feel it's like just another data tool in our arsenal and are excited about those outcomes? Where are you in your ethics around AI, and how important is it to make sure that you're creating an ethical AI? We're talking about bias, but I'm talking about AIs that actually produce results that can be understood, that, all these things. So where's your mind about the morality, the ethics of AI, and the use of AI?
I've always been an advocate and proponent of ethical and responsible AI. So I've been, in fact, been one of the first cohorts to have formally trained and certified in the AI governance professional training, which is all about, responsible and ethical use of AI and innovation. So we can take classic examples of our global regulations like EU AI Act and, even US executive orders on responsible AI. So I'm all for it, and specifically in the more regulated industries, not in the big tech world, because there, innovation takes precedence. But it's definitely one of the bigger challenges for highly regulated industries that we face today: a balance between an innovation or an ethical.
Yeah. I mean, there, you have to balance data privacy, ethics, compliance, all of these things in the world of financial institutions. Everybody needs to balance those things. There's probably fines and jail time and all those things if you don't do it in your industry. But everyone should be thinking about these, right? And I have so many risk managers coming to me and going, this was not even part of my job 5 years ago. Like, maybe I had to buy cybersecurity insurance and then I would just, mess off and not think about it anymore. Now you're actually putting a new risk into the mix, which is a employee who is not a human, a brain that is not human led. And so it's really interesting to think about, how do you balance innovation and the demand of businesses? All businesses are down. All businesses are struggling now more than they were in the past. Operations are keys at this point in time to businesses being successful, and really efficiency seems to be on the mind of everyone. So innovation and rigor of demand is there, but how do you balance that against data privacy, ethics, and compliance? How do you make the decision on what you are going to use the AI for and what you're not going to use the AI for?
As I already mentioned, it is currently, definitely one of the biggest challenges that especially the financial services industries face today. But it can be done, right? So the key is basically what we do is the build trust into the process. And instead of just blindly, building a machine and bolt it on afterward, right? So that means, we need to embed privacy checks, ethical reviews, and risk assessments early in the AI lifecycle itself. So when we decide an AI use case, so for example, if I'm going to use my AI use case for, a credit lending system or a credit risk monitoring system, how do I know that it's ethical? So during the inception, the design of that particular model itself, we decide that we are not going to use any personal information which would actually introduce any bias or discrimination. So for example, I'm not going to use a race, I'm not going to use age, I'm not going to use gender in my model parameters as the feed, like as an input to the feed to actually drive my outcome.
Do you think right now in that process that it's important to have that, let's call it switchback system of going from AI system to human validation, back to AI system, back to human validation? Or are you a proponent of AI to AI to AI, so agent to agent to agent to agent to agent, to where the output is? How important is the human verification at this point in time?
It's a must. I was in fact going to come on to that point. For me, I do not consider AI as artificial intelligence. I rather take it as augmented intelligence. So That's what I try to call it as augmented intelligence. It's there to support the human in terms of the monotonous banal work. But at the end of the day, where the systems are high risk systems, customer facing systems, I would not obviously take an AI to AI kind of a system. I would rather have a human verification done. Classic examples being chatbots, right? If my chatbot, which is a Gen AI based model, it ends up generating answers which are sensitive, which are offensive in nature, obviously I do not want it to continue and give me a reputational loss and obviously a bad customer experience. So that's where I'm definitely not an advocate of AI to AI agentic AI to AI transformation. However, when it comes to internal operational processes where I'm trying to reduce the operational costs, for example, taking meeting notes, which is kind of a day to day activity, and it's kind of a loss of effort and manpower in things where that particular manpower can be used in a much better way. I would rather not be having a human sitting there and listening throughout the meeting and taking notes. Instead, my Gen AI model can actually read that and generate that for me. Yeah, at the end of the day, I can actually have someone just have a cursory look at it. Still, I would need a human intervention.
Yeah, and providing the actual transcripts if someone has a question about.
Yeah, exactly. That verification is needed. So for sure, I'm more of a proponent of human verification and human involvement, and that's why I consider AI as augmented intelligence.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. That's how I view it too. I view it very much as a tool. And not to say that these systems aren't built on one another, but even in system to system designing, as a technical person, right now we have translation layers between systems. They're not really communicating directly and transforming information. It goes to an ETL, and the ETL does a transformation so that the human understands everything that's going in between two systems if something isn't going right, right? And I think that's something that people need to consider as they're building these things out into their roles. Looking ahead, what should banks and insurers be doing today to prepare for emerging AI regulation? Like we're always talking about, is it your belief that you need to be following these good processes now so that when AI becomes regulated by the government in those kind of situations, that you are putting your models ahead of that and going, this is what ethical and good behavior looks like. This is how you should be building the regulations. Because I mean, not to be a cynic, but I don't really think that the government has their arms around AI at this point in time and regulating it. How important is it for us to be demonstrating how this should be regulated? Is that something you think about?
Yeah, every day, in fact, because the global regulations are changing every damn day, right? So, especially with the US, executive order was there with the previous government and the new government. There is a different executive order that's going to be in place. But with respect to EU AI Act, for example, it's already in effect starting Feb 2025. So, majority of the multinational organizations, they have to abide with it even if the processes and the frameworks are not entirely defined or established. We still need to keep thinking about it because it's going to come back to us like GDPR, very much like GDPR. So, I mean, European Union being the first one to have an established model and act in place, we are already thinking on those lines. And in fact, what you would notice and observe is, other acts across the globe, like even NIST risk management framework for in the US, as well as APEC data laws and AI laws are all taking precedence from EU AI Act in one or the other way. So we are already, in middle of it. So I would say the first step for me to your question, should banks and insurance be, doing today what they should be doing today to prepare for the emerging AI regulations? I would say the first step is, to definitely know my AI footprint, because that's something that also is missing in the current processes, because organizations are just looking at jumping into the bandwagon to get innovation done one or the other way, but they have not even identified the right use cases or business processes. So I would say the first step is to know your AI footprint. That's where the organizations are struggling. Most number of failed or box projects, they have spent a lot on AI advancements and innovations, but not to show much of a result or revenue out of it. I would say another step is to actually baseline certain governance frameworks with protocols. So we already have data governance frameworks in place, right? So we already have some data management frameworks like DAMA, EDM councils, data governance frameworks, which are already kind of laying out the foundations of how we should envisage the foundational layers of data, how we should monitor, have the protocols and policies. And I think we can expand that. And that's what I am doing in my roles currently, right? Or even in recent past. What I've done is, I've taken those frameworks, policies, procedures, protocols, expanded it to include some of the AI regulations and protocols around it, like what parameters we should be using, specifically on the bias, explainability, traceability aspect of things.
And not assume that the technology provider is the one.
Not exactly. I mean, we need to have the in-house talent to stay abreast of the global developments because they are evolving every day. Every day there's a new one or the other change in the, say, even in UAI Act now. Looking at what happened with the executive order for responsible AI in the US that was passed, the bill that was passed last year, and now it's changed. So EUA Act is taking precedence from it and bringing in some leniencies instead of being a more conservative law. Again, the balance between innovation and all. But in that aspect, we need to stay abreast of the global developments. It's evolving every day. So I think that would keep any organization, no matter banks or insurance, it would keep any organization ahead in what they are, in how they treat their AI models and how they envisage their AI models moving forward.
Last question before we move on to risky or too risky, which is about this. And you said something that's interesting to me. Do you think it behooves organizations to have in-house AI talent versus just using external consultants to build these systems for themselves?
So it's not a straight answer. There's no straight answer to that, right? To each their own. Now, smaller organizations, obviously, like fintech startups, they do not have the leeway and leverage to have in-house talent as much as they can actually leverage external consultants or even contract contingent workers who are more prone, like a fractional kind of roles, right? So they can definitely leverage. When it comes to bigger organizations, multinational banks, global banks like Citi and JPNCs and all, they obviously would like to have either hire a new in-house talent, hire new talent from outside, or even develop and upskill their in-house element with who is already there in data management, data strategy. Those would be the natural followers or next step leaders to take over AI governance as well. So I think it's a balance. It's a mix of both. When it comes to in-house talent, they might not be aware of the latest technologies. They might not be well up to the mark with respect to the latest policies and procedures and developments, and that's where they can use the services of the external consultants like McKinsey's and the Deloitte's and the big fours who have obviously hired talent specifically to consult and advise on those aspects. But I think it is important when it comes to the ownership and burden and responsibility to take your own products forward internally. It is important for you to have your in-house talent as well.
Thank you so much, man. Fascinating conversation. I love seeing that this AI stuff is in every aspect of every kind of industry, from the most regulated to tech startups just building wrappers and kind of doing really risky stuff out there from a product perspective. It's just interesting. We're kind of like it's kind of like cloud all over again, right? With the added benefit of potentially this even being a bigger deal to how we actually build software and build product in our own businesses. Let's move on to risky or too risky. So I got a couple questions for you. There's no right or wrong answer. First one, investing heavily in a single technology trend without diversification, risky or too risky?
Too risky.
Too risky. Now, in the past, people have been all in on, Microsoft or some technology, and they're just kind of taking out what they want. But, my feeling is in the world of AI, there's not a clear winner right now, and you shouldn't be specific to one thing, especially, everyone's saying, Microsoft might win this thing, Google might win this thing, but Microsoft, because they're already embedded in all the enterprises and they have all of your data, but sometimes you don't want these models to have all your data, as we talked about on the show, right? You might want them just to have the data points if you're trying to build a decision model from an AI perspective. So very, very interesting. Why is it too risky for you?
Couple of reasons for that. One, your business use case might not align with all the one single technology stack or tech stack, which I have seen personally in my own experience. Following big names, big tech stack like Microsoft or the Googles or AWS alone in all the platforms, and investing as that much for a futuristic point of view where you're not even clear about your business case, too risky, because that investment, you don't know whether it's going to give you an ROI or not. So that's the first reason. Second reason, we only talk about the big names. Big names will come with their own product suite. So you are kind of tied down with the one single technology platform. Whereas there are so many innovators, so many new startups, and so many new platforms, which can actually be a good fit for your specific smaller use cases. And that's where I would say to diversify your tech stack and the platforms or tools to use specifically, which for the use cases that you have good clarity on, you can actually go with those tools and platforms in a short term or a tactical approach rather than a strategic approach of taking a whole set of tech stack with one technology provider.
And also, once you're all in and they know you have your systems, pricing risks, all these things incur on the business end that people aren't even thinking about. Everyone's acting like, they're like, I can't believe the AI is so cheap. I'm like, it's so cheap right now while they're trying to get everybody onto these models, right?
Precisely. They were increasing the subscription. So that has happened with the data platforms earlier, the data engineering platforms. We see that with the cloud platforms. It has already happened now that they have established. AI is still new. They are trying to break into the market. Once you are sold, you are probably sold for life. And then you have to go through another transformation.
I think I know the answer on this one, but allowing AI to handle critical client communications without human supervision, risky or too risky?
Too risky.
Engaging in a business deal without a formal contract for you personally, risky or too risky?
I would say risky because it's a situational, it's a circumstantial kind of an answer. It depends on the circumstances.
And I'll ask you this question in both of your environments. You said Chicago, right? And Singapore?
Yeah.
Taking a shortcut through a dark alley at night, Chicago, risky or too risky?
Depends on where you're living. If you're living in downtown and taking a downtown dark alley, yes, too risky. If you're in suburbs, depending on again which area or which neighborhood you're living in, risky or too risky. There's no right answer. Just be vigilant.
Yeah, okay. Singapore, too risky or risky?
Not even risky. I would say too safe. You can leave your wallet, you can leave your phone anywhere, and you will find it's there intact for you to take it back, hour or 2 hours, or even the next day.
Last question of the show here. Looking forward, what excites you the most about the role of AI in building smarter, more resilient functions in your industry? Like, it's still merging, but you're like excited about the promise of it. What areas are you applying AI to right now?
Yeah, so look, I do love the potential of AI itself in making life simpler. As I said, augmented intelligence, it is making life simpler. It is making life simpler in terms of even the smallest of the things, your day to day activities, that would take more time for you. For example, taking meeting minutes as a project manager, or as a project manager, if you want to just make up Excels, or want to do formulas and all, you have those Gen AI formulas now that you don't want to do VLOOKUPs on your own and all that. So those are classic, easier, simpler cases or examples of making your life easier. And I also love the potential that the AI has to make, your risk, specifically on the risk aspect, the risk teams being more proactive than reactive. So providing those guardrails and a clear structure at the inception of the models itself on where we can direct it. If we actually do it well, it would reap results, right? So I think what excites me even more is, as we already mentioned, responsible AI, right? The systems that not only perform well, to do so ethically, transparently, and fairness built in, but with a human touch. So human intervention, as I said, is important. I would say the combination of human and AI is what excites me more, instead of the whole AI agent to AI agent thing. I would say unless AI or agentic AI is not established enough, haven't gone through the whole risk monitoring and vigilance process, it doesn't make sense to go into jump onto the bandwagon. But I am really excited on what it has to offer from a day-to-day evolution perspective.
I am super excited about, I am a big proponent and have been for a long time of organizational process called the second brain, where all of your information is going into this. And I have been now recording, and basically every meeting I have with an external person who I find interesting, like these podcasts, but also my personal meetings, taking all of that and putting it into my AI meeting notes, having it then reference things like my daily pages that I write, and then saying, hey, this reminds us of the time we were talking to so-and-so and they were mentioning this other thing, right? So I've been finding it very, very interesting in bringing back up ideas and making connections. And I find that to be really fascinating, because I think that we all have the job we're trying to be done today. Like we're both on a podcast today, but this information that we've talked about is more actionable than just this podcast today and getting to an interview per se. And I love the idea that we're reusing our intelligence and reusing this background. So I find it to be really, really fascinating. The other thing from a risk perspective that I think is interesting is the big elephant in the room for all businesses is they all know they have a risk appetite, which is you can't have business without risk. But no one can really wrap their arms around something at any given point in time and say, hey, what does my risk appetite really look like right now? Where am I opening myself up to the biggest risks? Was that risk worth it? these are things that risk managers really don't have time to answer today, that I'm really, really excited that AI is going to be able to be looking at this data and then allowing people the flexibility to ask questions of the data that they didn't ask to begin with. I think that's a promise we've all wanted with data, but we all know when you build data insights, you kind of have to build the data to the insight you're after, right? And this is a interesting time where insights might actually become insightful on their own. And so I'm excited about seeing that happen for everyone.
Absolutely. Yes. Totally agree.
Well, man, it was really great talking to you, and I hope I see you out in the field. I really appreciate what you're doing. I really appreciate people in our industry who are not afraid to lean in on AI, but are still being reasonable about the fact that it is a new technology and that we need to treat it with the respect that we treat all new technologies and be responsible with it. I think this is our Pandora's box, and we have to be careful about how we handle it and manage it. And so I really appreciate there are people like you in the field defining that for organizations.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate your time as well. I mean, it was a fantastic chat. Learned a lot as well myself from you. So it's great.
Awesome, man. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason.
Risk Management Brick by Brick is brought to you by TrustLayer. Find out how TrustLayer manages risk so that the people can build the physical world around us. Head over to trustlayer.io. And then make sure to subscribe to Risk Management Brick by Brick on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. On behalf of the TrustLayer team, thank you for listening.